You are lying in bed. The door is closed. The lights are off. Your partner is next to you. And for these few minutes, nobody else on earth can see you or hear you. That feels like one of the most basic things a person can have. Every house you have ever lived in came with a door that shuts. It seems like privacy has just always been part of being human. It has not. For almost the entire time your species has existed, a moment like that never happened to anyone. Not once. So how did people get any time alone at all? What did you do when you wanted to grieve without an audience? Or be intimate with a partner, while 20 other people slept a few feet away? And how did a species survive for hundreds of thousands of years without a single locked door? The short answer is you did not get any. The real answer is a lot stranger than that. Homo sapiens goes back roughly 300,000 years, a date anchored by fossils from Jebel Arhoud in Morocco, analyzed by paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin's team and published in Nature in 2017. For most of that span, people lived in bands of about 15 to 50 individuals, a range documented again and again by anthropologist Richard Lee, whose fieldwork with the Juhowansi of the Kalahari began in the mid-1960s. Camps were built around one open ring of huts, facing a single shared fire. No back rooms, no hallways, no door that closes behind you. Everyone in that circle could see who came and went. Everyone could hear a raised voice, a cough, a whispered argument. So here is the first real problem a group like that has to solve. If everyone can always hear everything, how does anyone ever get a private moment without walls to provide one? The first fix was darkness. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades analyzing recorded Juhowansi conversation and found, in a 2014 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, that daytime talk ran mostly on complaints, gossip, and logistics, while nighttime talk around, the fire flipped almost entirely into storytelling and softer social bonding. Night was not just for sleeping. It was the group's unofficial, gentler hour, running on firelight instead of a dimmer switch. But darkness alone did not solve the sound problem. Since voices carry just fine in the dark, that forced a second fix. And it was not distance from other people. It was distance from other people's attention, which turns out to be a very different tool. Lee documented it. And so did anthropologist Marjorie Shostak in her 1981 account. Nisa couples slipping just past the ring of firelight at night, not far enough to be out of earshot, since wandering into real darkness in lion country was a bad idea. Just far enough to signal one thing to the group. Please stop paying attention now. Picture it. The fire has burned down to embers. Most of the camp is asleep or drifting there. Bodies pulled close together against a desert that turns cold fast once the sun drops. One couple gets up quietly and steps just past the edge of the light. Nobody stops talking. Nobody turns to look. A few feet away, an old woman keeps telling a story about a leopard to two half-asleep kids, her voice never dropping, because there is nothing left to hide and nowhere to hide it anyway. Only that same quiet agreement that some moments simply are not everybody's business, even when everybody can technically hear them. Here is the specific question you are probably actually wondering. So let's just answer it directly instead of dancing around it. What did people do about sex? With the whole camp within earshot. Shostak's interviews with Juhowansi women describe exactly this pattern. Timing plus short distance, not real separation, paired with an understanding that the rest of camp would not comment on it in the morning. Nobody built a wall for that. The group just agreed to pretend it did not hear. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe's research on the Hadza of Tanzania, conducted through the 2010s, and found the same social habit in a completely different environment. Sleeping clusters pressed close together for warmth and predator safety, paired with a strong norm researchers call polite deafness hearing everything and reacting to none of it. Privacy was a favor, not a wall. Nobody built it. Everyone agreed to grant it. And everyone could take it back. That still leaves one obvious problem unsolved, though, because a favor only works if there is nothing worth hoarding behind it. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes's Hadza fieldwork, running since the mid-1980s, found that a successful hunter's kill got distributed across the entire camp rather than kept for one household, and running that system fairly required everyone to actually see how much everyone else had. A private stash was nearly impossible to keep secret in a camp where every meal was, by necessity, public information. So food forced visibility, and visibility ended up protecting the group from something bigger than a hidden snack. That something bigger was power. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm's 1999 study of egalitarian societies argued that constant social observation was one of the main tools small bands used to stop any one person from grabbing too much control. You cannot quietly build a private empire in a place with no privacy to build it in. Gossip, mockery, and public shame worked like an unwritten constitution, and hypervisibility was the enforcement branch. The same lack of walls that stole your alone time also kept your camp from ever having a tyrant. Privacy stayed a favor. But the favor was doing double duty, protecting couples at night and keeping bullies in check during the day. Now, you might be thinking, this is all based on how a few modern hunter-gatherer groups live today. So how does anyone know ancient people, tens of thousands of years earlier, actually lived the same way? Faire question. Researchers like anthropologist Robert Kelly, whose comparative synthesis of forager societies across multiple continents has been a standard reference in the field since the 1990s, point to convergence as the evidence. Groups with no contact with each other, in deserts, forests, and Arctic tundra, independently arrived at nearly identical open camp layouts and nearly identical social privacy rules. When unrelated societies keep landing on the same solution without copying each other, researchers treat that as a strong sign. The pattern is old, not a coincidence of one group's modern circumstances. Here is something else that should not have worked, but did. Sleep researcher Jerome Siegel led a 2015 study in Current Biology that recorded actual sleep in 3 traditional societies, including the Hadza and the Juhoanzi-san. The finding was not that people slept worse in a crowd. It was that all 3 groups averaged under 7 hours a night, close to or even shorter than typical industrialized sleep duration, and reported almost no insomnia. Constant company did not wreck their rest the way a snoring roommate might wreck yours tonight. So darkness bought people time, distance bought them space. Polite deafness bought them silence about what happened in that space. Food sharing forced the visibility that made all of it necessary in the first place. And that same visibility, once it existed, turned out to be the only thing standing between a small band and its own future bully. That is the whole trick. Compressed. No walls. No locks. No rooms. Just a system built entirely out of manners, and it held for 300,000 years, which is what makes the twist land so hard. You would assume walls showed up because someone finally got fed up with being watched and invented privacy on purpose. They did not. As farming spread starting roughly 10,000 years ago, people stopped moving with the seasons, and that forced permanent structures. Those structures forced storage, since stored grain needed protecting from weather and rivals. Protecting stored grain forced walls, and walls, once they existed for a completely different reason, only afterward got repurposed into something that also happened to hide a bed. Not for shame. Not for shyness. For grain, even after walls arrived, they did not deliver privacy the way you would picture it. Historian Witold Rybczynski. In his 1986 study, Home: A Short History of an Idea, traces how the private bedroom only became standard, even for the middle class in Western Europe, within the last few centuries. Before that, servants routinely slept in the same room as their employers, sometimes at the foot of the bed, well into the 1600s. Your ancestors were still being watched sleep by hired strangers around the same era. Gunpowder weapons were already common on European battlefields. The wall never replaced the favor, it just gave the favor somewhere to stand. Which brings up the part that stings a little. You probably assume more privacy simply made people happier. Safash. Calmer. Psychologist Julianne Holt-Lundstad's research at Brigham Young University, including a widely cited 2015 meta-analysis, linked chronic social isolation to a mortality risk, roughly comparable to smoking close to half a pack of cigarettes a day. Your species spent 300,000 years building an entire nervous system around near-constant company. You are now asking that same nervous system to feel fine behind a locked door, on a floor where you might not know a single neighbor's name. You still run the old software. Even now, you look away when a stranger's phone screen faces you on the subway. You step just outside a shared office for a hard phone call. Everyone can still faintly hear through the glass. You give a roommate 10 quiet minutes in the kitchen without ever asking why. None of that is architecture. It is the exact same unwritten agreement your ancestors were running around. A fire 300,000 years before drywall existed. Just quieter now. And running on thinner apartment walls instead of open desert night air. These days, plenty of those walls are thin enough that you can hear a neighbor's alarm clock go off 2 rooms over. And you already know to pretend you did not. It's probably quiet in Houston right now. Or is it? For 300,000 years. Being seen was what kept you alive. Then walls showed up. And now the thing that used to protect you is the exact thing you pay rent every single month. To finally get away from, as Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis put it back in 1928, privacy is, in his words, the right to be let alone. Your ancestors never had that right. Not really. Not the way you picture it. What they had instead was harder to build than any wall, a few hundred people who could hear absolutely everything, and chose, on purpose, most nights, not to. Tonight, when you close that door, you are not just getting some time alone. You are spending something your ancestors spent 300,000 years learning to live entirely without.